gentlemen. You're listening to the Auxiliary Things podcast with your hosts, Jade and Nathan. Take it away.
So, today's podcast, as we are in the last couple hours leading up to Game 5 of the NBA Finals, is going to be all things Kawhi Leonard. Because let's face it, without that trade, this Game 5 is not happening. So, we're going to go through our perspective as serious fans of kind of just the whole journey from the nonsense in San Antonio to media day, the season, the playoffs, the finals, and finally free agency. So we'll start with finding out that Kawhi had requested a trade from the San Antonio Spurs. It wasn't really, it wasn't in the middle of my radar as far as the NBA went. It was on the periphery. Like, I knew he hadn't played, and that some stuff had gone on. But until the trade, I didn't really look into it. Once I found out he was being traded, I looked into it. And frankly was appalled at what I found. I'm still pretty appalled by it, but what did you think?
Well, I thought it was strange because, like, it like with you, it was on the outside. I just sort of just saw it pop up in one of the news thing with blips on the internet, and I'm just like, all right, what's going on there? Because from what anything I've known about the Spurs organization is, for the most part, when you're there, you don't have any issues. You just know that you have to play hard for kind of a hard nosed coach, and they don't have any drama in the organization, or so I thought.
Well, and that's the thing. So you thought, now that you're saying it, and I'm thinking about it as you're talking, I'm thinking about what we know about Coach Popovich. Incredible coach, no question about that. Military background. That should have been our first clue. Right? Because crap happens in the military that gets covered up all the time.
Oh, of course.
Right? The perception, the veneer that they present to the public is not consistent with a lot of what happens behind closed doors.
Absolutely.
And so now in hindsight, it kind of seems like, of course, the organization was not that shiny. No organization is, except maybe the Raptors. Wink, wink. But honestly, though, and so then when I started reading what had happened, I was like, are you, like, seriously? And so, of course, the media has talked about it a lot, and there's a few things that were of note to me. The one thing that was of note was, I think it was Stephen A. talking about how the comments that Tony Parker made to the media.
Yeah, Tony. Yeah.
I
think Ginobili and a couple other players might have.
Right, but kind of to the effect of, we don't know what his deal is, or it seemed to imply that they didn't believe he was incapable of playing. And Stephen A., I can't remember who he was talking to in that clip, and if it was him that said it or the other person, but basically making the point that, do you believe that Tony Parker says something like that without Pop knowing about it?
It's just like it was already passed by, like someone actually would have okayed it,
right?
Or co-signed it, or
yeah, because like you said, Pop's a hard-nosed coach, and San Antonio cared about their image. That's why they seem to be squeaky clean, like we talked about. So does that comment happen publicly to the media without him,
or someone of importance,
at the very least, without Tony Parker knowing that it's at least they're going to look the other way?
Probably not.
I don't think so
You
either.
don't. Other than Steven Jackson, who was there, I think he won a title there in San Antonio like a few years back. I can't think of anyone who's really outspoken who's played for that organization that
Mm-hmm.
might have a slip of the tongue and let's say something you're not supposed to say.
Right.
Those guys seemed all pretty, you know,
Under
under
the
control,
thumb. Yeah.
even within themselves, under
And
control.
again, like the military, stuff stays inside. The second thing of note for me was I listened to the first episode of Danny Green's podcast, Inside the Green Room. And the podcast starts with finding out a trade was happening and he was going to be involved and Kawhi was getting traded. And so, of course, being the guy that came over with him from San Antonio, you can't talk about that without, he couldn't talk about that without addressing the players only meeting,
Right.
which everybody knew happened. And to hear Danny talk about it, and I don't doubt this is how it happened because, like, Danny's clearly a really straight up guy, and he's not with the organization anymore. He has no reason to talk about it in any way other than what actually happened. So he said it was just a meeting just to find out, are you gonna are we gonna have to do this playoff run this year without you? He said it wasn't confrontational. It was, I want to say he said it was about 10 games left in the season, and they just wanted to know, do we have to prepare to do this without you? Seems reasonable.
Sure.
Right? And so then finding out what was said to the media after that meeting leaves me with the impression that that meeting was not used by everyone the way it was meant to be used. If there were grievances to be aired out, if people were feeling some kind of way about all of the games that Kawhi had already missed, that was the forum to talk about it privately, behind closed doors, in a players only meeting.
Yeah.
So why didn't that happen?
Your guess is as good as mine. I guess some people just get salty and they think someone's milking it. I know I've been on job sites where people think there are guys out there dogging it, and it comes out in the gossip mill.
Yeah.
You will hear about it somewhere else down the line. Oh yeah, this guy's not pulling his weight. He's petting the dog. That's the term.
Okay.
um, so it's possible that hey, like some people were not uh, supportive.
It just seems like that, like, to my understanding, obviously I'm not an NBA player, I've never been in a players only meeting, but any players only meeting I've ever heard about, that's been the point. If you have something to say, you say it in that room behind closed doors, you work it out as a team so that you can go out and present a united front.
Yep.
That's not, doesn't seem to be what happened, especially since we're taking Danny's description of what happened behind those closed doors to be what happened. He also mentioned that in San Antonio franchise history, it's the first meeting that's ever been leaked. And he didn't say one way or another if he knew who had leaked it. I don't even know if I don't remember if he addressed that or not, but I know there was no name. Definitely didn't say who he thought or if they knew who leaked it, but it's never happened before. And the last thing of note, I can't remember who it was, somebody that was on the jump that was a teammate of Kawhi's
Steven Jackson.
back in the day.
Yeah.
Made a comment about how Kawhi always felt kind of on the outside of that team.
That was definitely Steven Jackson.
And he mentioned because he wanted his braids. And that was apparently not cool. And it's funny because since I heard that, I've seen old footage of that team with Kawhi, with Danny, Tony Parker, Tim Duncan, there is no personal style on that team outside of Kawhi's braids. Everybody has the same haircut.
2014,
and
yeah,
it's a military, short, buzzed haircut.
yeah.
Every single person. And I mean, look at Danny Green's hair now. Look at his personal style. I understand that he was a lot younger.
26, 27, maybe.
Right? But still, that's old enough, especially when you have money, that you probably start to be expressing a little more style. And his haircut now is a very personal kind of, it's not like even Kyle Lowry, fine. Kyle Lowry had a buzz cut when he was younger too. He has more hair now, but it's still a pretty like tame kind of average haircut.
Yeah, definitely wasn't trying to draw attention to himself.
Right. Whereas Danny's now rocking a mohawk.
I mean, I noticed even years after that, those San Antonio championship level teams that, guys like Patty Mills was still with the team. He has this weird braids thing over the last 3 years. I don't know if he had that during that title run. So maybe some combination of, the military kind of culture plus, Tim Duncan was their leader. He was their leader. So he's very low key kind of guy.
Yeah.
He never had any style.
Which is, of course, why him and Pop got along so well.
Right. So probably that's probably a dynamic caused by the leader of the team as well as the
it's the
organization,
the coaching, especially Coach Pop. So that leads us to, I mean, that's what happened. We found out about it after the trade because that's when we decided to really look into it. We get to media day. The trade's done. We were in that group of Raptors fans that we were like, wait a second. Wait. We're trading DeMar DeRozan? For who? Who did we get for DeMar DeRozan? No. And it wasn't like, oh, poor DeMar, they did him wrong, blah, blah, blah. No. It was like, bye, DeMar. It's nice to have you, but we will not miss you because you don't play defense.
Truthfully, I was like, see ya. All right, well, it's been a good run.
It's been a good run.
As you remember over the years, I've had my fits of yelling at the TV. DeMar, move your feet. Stop. What? That was your man. Seeing poor Valanciunas or Jakob Pertl getting dunked on, and then hitting the rewind to see
because
DeMar
blew his coverage.
Oh, every game.
Every game. And that's why I very much feel like he's been a bit of a crybaby about the whole trade. Because, and I don't mean any disrespect, but number one, you go to work as a job.
Yes.
You get paid to do your job. Mm-hmm. It is a business first. Just like any job I've ever had, I've always known that I could get fired at any time.
Anytime. That's
called having a job.
You don't own it.
You don't own it. You are expendable.
Yep.
Period. Nobody is untradeable. Certainly a person who has peaked and what he can do in the playoffs with an organization is not untradeable. DeMar has always been a liability defensively against his counterparts.
Yep.
Did he have a great offensive game? Did he learn how to work the system? Free throws, mid-range? Absolutely, he had all of that. But he was a one-way player. And that's it.
He's a less talented James Harden.
You can't be the first option and be that much of a liability defensively and be successful.
As we've seen with James Harden.
Right?
You do.
You're only gonna go so far. And one of the things I do love about DeMar is he is a freaking hard worker. He improved his game every year, but he never improved his defense. Why? You were making lots of buckets. You were scoring lots of points. Why are you still only working on part of your game that already works the best, the part that you're already more talented at? When you're talented at something, you work you when you're assessing yourself, you should choose to work on the stuff that you don't have natural talent at so you can be a little more level.
Well, I asked the same question. I was like, my man, you're talented, you work hard. The 3 point shot never really came around.
And he didn't need it.
He needed it since he didn't play defense because he gave up so many points on the other
I
end.
I guess if you want to put it that way.
The extra point helps.
It helps. It does help. And here's the reason why when it really comes down to it, the defense bothers me. The lack of defensive improvement bothers me so much. When JV had to have surgery on his hand 4 seasons ago. I don't remember exactly what year it was, but he was out for extended time. And the coaching staff and the trainers worked on his lateral movement while his hand was healing.
And sprinting.
So he came back with better conditioning and much better lateral movement. He's still 7 feet tall. He's still going to be slower than a Kawhi or a Clay or those other elite defenders,
or
obviously.
An actual athletic big guy.
Right? But it was a noticeable improvement in a couple of months because that's what they chose to work on. Why couldn't DeMar have done that? At DeMar's size, he should have been able to make at least as much improvement as JV did, and I think more, had he just chosen to focus on that.
And the thing about defense is, to do it well, you gotta want it.
You have
it's
to
like
want
rebounding.
Yeah.
It's not just, you can't just loaf your way with some footwork, like an offense and get space. And no, you actually have to want to stop the guy.
But and also on the flip side, kind of the other side of that same coin, all you have to do is want it. Right? You can learn the movements that make you a great defender, even if you're not a great shooter, even if you're not great at other offensive things. And because he was already talented, he could get buckets.
Mm-hmm.
Right? All he had to do was want to be better at defense. With his work ethic and his athleticism, he could have got better at it. I think he could have got a lot better at it. And he just never did. So for us, we're getting that level, the same or better offense with 1,000 times better defense in the same position.
Without the emotional and unfortunate mental situation.
Right, but I mean, he overcame that pretty well as far as playing went.
Well, not in the playoffs. What do you mean, this year?
Okay, we're not doctors. We don't know him. We've never spoken to him. We're in no position to say how much it affected his play.
Well, that might be so, but Kawhi doesn't have none of that. So it's another reason.
You don't know that. You don't know that. Everybody goes through stuff.
Kawhi is a robot monster, and that's how.
Okay, but you can. That doesn't make you right. You can think of it however you want, but just realistically, we're not in a position to know how much that stuff affects. We can only talk about what we see accurately. Otherwise, we're just saying stuff like all the other media people that we hate listening to.
Sure.
So anyways, next thing was Media Day, the next kind of big milestone. And the laugh that has become famous and hilarious and is your ringtone for your notifications.
It's a great laugh.
It's always hilarious when he gets a message or an email or whatever it is out of the blue, and that's the noise that comes out of his phone. But this guy's been in the league for how many years? And this laugh was like a revelation. That's how Kawhi laughs. It's to me it says something about, even though Toronto was not his first choice of where he wanted to end up, that's common knowledge. It still says to me that maybe there's some weight lifted just being out of the situation he was in.
I can see that, especially after a lot of the vet guys, like after Timmy was gone, there's a transition period,
Yeah.
and things wouldn't have been as smooth during the transition period.
No.
So yeah, I'm sure the the Raptors team is pretty lighthearted and young
Yeah.
and playful from what I can tell.
But also still business-like, focused. Like it kind of seems like the best of both worlds for him, because he doesn't have to worry about, because how am I going to say this? Okay, so they've been talking about how the team has adopted Kawhi's calmness and his kind of his persona, his focus.
Mm-hmm.
But without those guys already being the types of guys that could lock in that way, that doesn't work.
Okay, yeah.
Right? So it's like the Raptors were they're a winning team regular season, but they were a bit of a blank canvas that just needed that last touch to bring everything to where it needed to be. And Kawhi was that touch. He was the missing thing.
Yeah, him and Nick Nurse, but yeah.
Nick Nurse too, yeah. You got to give credit to Nick, but we're talking about Kawhi today, so
Yeah, Kawhi, yeah, he definitely added that in. But back to the laugh, which is hilarious. It was very interesting to get a glimpse into what everyone thought was a complete statue of a person.
which is silly, but yeah, I get it. And then the next big thing for me was the when Toronto went to play in San Antonio. I like I'm still flabbergasted at how brutal the fan base was
Yeah, that was sad
during that game.
and embarrassing.
Like I just
It
and
was. Go ahead.
I understand things like that, like Vince wasn't super well received when he came back after he requested a trade for a lot of years. Fans eventually got over it. Maybe San Antonio fans will too, but I mean, with Skip Bayless out there, I don't see that happening the same way. But I think the thing that blows my mind the most about the whole thing is, how do you guys not know him better than that?
Yeah, or whether they cared enough. But that's the thing. Like sometimes when I think of those military-ish programs, I also think of some of the brainwashing that goes with the people around the organization. That, oh, if you're not with us, then you're against us, kind of thing. Which
Right.
means even the dysfunction is part of being with us or not, and they don't want
Right.
to acknowledge that there might have been dysfunction, like they were the perfect organization.
Right.
It's like,
And not being with us can be as simple as, I'm hurt. I literally can't play. That's the thing that's crazy to me. Like, Kawhi's only been in Toronto for a year. But
yeah,
even before he got here, even before the season started, when I started looking into him as a player and saw his resume as a basketball player in San Antonio, how do you as a fan base, how do you as teammates not realize that if this guy could be playing, he would be playing?
yeah, and it's not about a whole a contract year coming up situation. He
No,
doesn't even think like
he
that.
doesn't think. He loves basketball. He loves to play and he just wants to win. That's all he cares about.
He was actually perfect for San Antonio, but they just missed it.
Yeah.
I don't know what
Because
they
he
were looking
wanted,
at.
why? Because he wanted to have a little bit of personal style. He couldn't, like, he's a, it's weird to say, but he's the perfect fit for any team because he doesn't care. He doesn't care about the personal accomplishments. He doesn't care what the media is talking about. He doesn't care what the other team's saying. All he cares about is winning basketball games. Like, that's the ideal basketball player. And he's good at it.
And he's really good at it. And you messed that up,
You
San
messed it up.
Antonio Spurs.
Like,
Spurs
and the
fans.
things on his resume too, like defensive all NBA teams, defensive player of the year,
Finals
those
MVP.
are the things that come from hard work. Right? Some people are naturally better at defense than others and have advantages like his giant hands. I'm not saying that that's irrelevant, but like we talked about before, defense is about wanting it more than the other guy. Right? That comes from people who play hard every possession, every trip, every time. How do you play with an organization for that long and them not realize, oh crap, he must really be hurt if he's missing this many games? How do they not know how much he wants to be out there?
There's nothing wrong with him wanting a second opinion from one of his own doctors.
Seriously, that's the other thing that makes me a little bit crazy. Like, getting a second opinion is being a patient 101 when something serious happens, right? If somebody goes to the doctor and they say, oh, you have cancer, you go get a second opinion. It's something that is a serious impact on your life. Now, for us, if it was a muscle strain or torn this or torn that, maybe we won't go get a second opinion because our livelihood might not depend on it the same way it definitely would depend on it if you're a professional athlete.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about an injury that, if mishandled, could ruin his career as he's coming into his peak years. Why would you be upset that he gets a second opinion? Oh, and let's not forget, the doctors that are saying he's good to go are paid by the team that threw him under the bus.
Yeah. People forget that. Who pays your bills? Who pays the bill? That's who they work for. They're swayed a lot of times in that direction.
Well, I mean, and even if they weren't, like, I don't know anything. I don't even know the names of any of the doctors on any team other than the Raptors, any of the training staff, any of the medical. And I'm certainly not saying that that's what happened. I'm just saying, why is it crazy to get a second opinion in those circumstances?
It's not. And I think of another superstar who could have used a second
I know
opinion.
where you're
And
going.
he did. I don't know if he did in time, but he played on a broken or fractured tibia or something like that. His ankle was broken.
Yep.
And he goes by the name of, I'm sure you may have heard it before, Grant Hill.
Grant Hill. And I was a Raptors fan. I was a Detroit fan when Grant Hill was there. So when I think about that, it literally makes me cringe because he was incredible.
He was incredible.
He was so much fun to watch. He was such a good basketball player. And it ruined his career.
Ruined him. They
Again
ruined him.
and again, he didn't make it to his peak years. He hadn't peaked yet when that happened.
He was probably 30. He was 29 or 30.
Yeah. But he had like a couple really good years coming.
He should never have played.
He shouldn't have played. And I mean, I bet if you could look back at that, he'd like to have that one back.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, trusting the team doctors didn't help him there.
And like I said, I don't think it means they shouldn't trust their team doctors. I just think it means if you want a second opinion, it shouldn't be like you're now a black sheep because you needed a second opinion and because your second opinion didn't match what your team doctor said. Doctors are people. They are fallible. They make mistakes all the time. That's why they have insurance.
Can't get everything right every time. You know, there's more than one ref on the floor. Can't see everything.
And I mean, goodness knows they don't see everything. 3 of them.
That's a different story.
That's a different story. One we will talk about at some point in the future. So now we get to the season and the new term that was coined this season, load management. There's been a lot of flack about the load management from fans, from media personalities. I think it's brilliant.
I looked at it like it was annoying sometimes as a fan, but at the same time, you're a fan. No one cares what you think unless you're paying money. And if you're paying money, do you want your team to do well? You know, real fans want their team to do well,
Yeah.
the best that they can do. And the regular season is not the season to be your best.
Right. And I think that was it's a weird shift. I know even you as a longtime Raptors fan, you're having to adjust to what's going on right now. It still seems like is not quite real almost. And I'm seeing stuff all over Twitter too of fans saying, is this for real? Like this is happening. This is actually happening. And I think that was part of the shift is that the Raptors are a playoff team. The last 3 seasons, I would say, it wasn't a question of were they going to make it to the playoffs. It was a question of how far into the playoffs were they going to make it. They're a
Yes.
postseason team now. And that means you don't need your number one scorer to play every game. You're
Nope.
they made it I cannot overstate this, and it makes me crazy that so little of the media conversation has gone to this. 22 starting lineups this season. Injuries, personal problems, no OG, all playoffs. But even before the playoffs, all of those starting lineups, all of those personnel shuffling and not being able to play lots of minutes together before the playoffs, they still ended up with the second best regular season record in the league.
How does that happen?
And but that proves the point of why load management should have been no big deal. Look what they did. With all of those missing pieces outside of load management, with 20 games of load management on top of that, they're a few hours from possibly being NBA Finals champions as we speak. Why wouldn't you do load management? Look at what he's done in the playoffs. There are games that, like, okay, if
Uh-oh.
he had not been in the position in the physical condition from the rest he got in the regular season, the Raptors would be out of the playoffs right now.
Oh, I don't doubt it. Philadelphia would have sent them home. They
Philadelphia,
would have
and it
barely
still took
scraped
Game
by
7.
Orlando.
It still took 7 games against Philadelphia.
Yeah, they barely
But
scraped by Orlando.
how many games this postseason have we won? And Matt Devlin has said Kawhi willed them to that win, or other people have said Kawhi has carried this team this postseason, and I heard him say it within this last week. We are not here without load management this year. Do it every year. I like
It's a great idea.
it's a great idea. Why do you need your superstar players if you have enough to get you into the playoffs? And everybody talks about how, oh, the great teams have an extra level when it gets to playoffs. It's almost like an idling during the regular season because you know you're going to get enough wins. You still got to play hard, of course. But there's an extra gear that you can find for the playoffs. This is the first year the Raptors have had it.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Right? So why not? Load management forever. And it's great for the league too because you're going to get more higher quality seasons out of your best guys. More quality playoff runs out of the best guys in the league if they're not playing all 82 games.
It's true. And which ones are they sitting out? If they're playoff teams, they'd be sitting out second games of back to backs or first games of back to
Or
backs.
right? And the
And
bottom teams.
the bottom teams on the road. Those would be the ones that
Your
I think.
Knicks, your Hawks, Who's in the bottom of the West this year?
Phoenix Suns.
Phoenix,
Oh yeah.
right? You don't need him to play those games. Let him rest. It's brilliant. I think it's I just think it's such a good idea. I think it's a stroke of genius. Whoever in the Raptors organization or whatever group of people came up with that, pat on the back.
Yep, because now we get to witness
Because
possibly.
this is happening. And there's so many benefits. There's so many benefits to it that it's such a big thing that's been, I feel like, has been neglected for a lot of years. That was always possible. Because what's the point of the ability of changing your roster throughout the season? Like, that's taking full advantage of the fact that the league says, yeah, change your roster. Right? There's no rule that says a player only can't play if he's hurt.
No, actually, it might be. You might want to research that. I think there are some fines in the past for at the end of the season, guys would sit out games. I think there might have been some issue in the league there.
I
Don't
don't.
quote me
I
on it.
no no. I don't think there was fines because I don't think there's any rules about it. That's why there was a conversation about it in the first place, because fans were annoyed that the big people, the big names, were sitting out games against big teams at the end of the season.
Okay.
Right, big matchups. I did do a fair bit of reading about that when it was going on. I don't remember reading anywhere that there was fines. I remember reading that there was talk of introducing that.
Okay.
But I think if the league is very, they really take into consideration all sides of things.
Now they do.
And I think that if they were to really sit down, with the yellow legal pad and do a pros and cons list of that kind of thing, I think they would find that the benefits far outweigh the fans being upset that so and so didn't play. Or if they really felt the need to regulate it, you say teams above 500 or below 500 or within a certain range of what your record is or whatever it is. Right? Keep it to teams that are at the bottom of your record and not against, you know, other teams that are fighting for playoff spots or whatever, if they really feel the need to regulate it. But since the end of, I think it was the end of last season that was all going on, because LeBron sat out some games. It was definitely before he went to LA. Um, and I don't think that's, I don't know, I don't see the league going in that way of fines for players not
Yeah,
playing.
it'd probably be team fines, but hopefully it doesn't come to that because look where the Raptors are now.
Yeah, it's great stuff. And so we're an hour and 20 minutes from game 5 starting. Hopefully that will be a finals championship for the Raptors. The last thing we do want to address, of course, you can't talk about Kawhi right now without talking about free agency. And there's a lot of people, just like usual, we Raptors fans are used to the Raptors being dismissed. And most people are dismissing the Raptors as an option for Kawhi to stay when free agency starts in a couple of weeks, few weeks.
Well, we still have this. I don't know. People around in the states think that Toronto's some backwater city or something. Or at least there's a percentage of people who do, or maybe they just find it's fun to troll the Raptors fans because of our well-known insecurity.
Well, and I think it's human nature, right? They're not in the states, so the only team that is not physically located in the states, that the nail that stands out gets hit, right? We will always be outsiders, especially if we continue to be the only NBA team outside of the United States. I think it's high time that Canada got another basketball team. I think they can support another one again. Basketball's grown in leaps and bounds since the Grizzlies left Vancouver. But as long as we're the outlier just geographically, and that just based on human nature, is often enough.
Sad to say, but yeah.
But
So Kawhi.
my take on free agency is this. When he found out he was getting traded to Toronto, even though 100% I'm sure he was focused on the season and what he wanted to accomplish, but one of two things happened. He either decided right then and there, I'm just going to do this for a year and I'm going to be gone, regardless of anything that happens during the season, or he said, let me see how this goes. Right? Those are really the only two options of things that could have happened. He wasn't indifferent about it, it's his career. He's thought something about it. He's not thinking about it now because they've got game 5 to play. It's the finals. But there's no way he hasn't thought about it during the season, and especially at the beginning when he was first traded. So the way I see it is, if option A happened, he was always going to go. If that's how he felt, he was always going to go. It didn't matter how the season shaped up. Option B, if there was any chance that the organization, that the way the season went, that the fans could influence whether or not he wanted to stay, he is staying in Toronto, at least short term.
It's true. He doesn't have to sign a big max deal. He could do one of those 1-on-1s or something like that.
Right.
Something short term, get a big chunk of money, but not tie his whole prime of his career to a city, to a team that's likely going to be having a roster switchover as players have been aging. Right. Kyle's getting older. Danny's getting older. There might be some roster changes happening where he may not want to be there for that. If he's considered that, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, but
But at the same time, you've got an up and coming Pascal Siakam. He's the future of the Raptors. I mean, even in trade talks this season, his name and OG were the names that the Raptors said there's no deal happening with those guys. Right? So at the same time, there is a clear direction that looks pretty good for if we do move out some of those guys. But my point is, if there was any chance that he could be won over, he has been won over. If there was any chance, this season could not have gone better. There's nothing that could have gone better this season. The fans love him. He the organization respected his concerns about being able to have a long career. They didn't require him to play all those games, right? So he's in the best shape he could have been after an injury going into the playoffs. Toronto can offer him a lot more money than anybody else can this season, this off season. Right? So between those things, there are a lot of just logical reasons why not give it another year or two. Kyle's contract's going to be up after next season, I believe.
sounds about right.
So why not give it another go while Kyle's still there? Kyle's still playing great basketball. I would argue he's playing even better now that he doesn't have to be relied upon as much to score, as much as when DeMar was there. He had to be the number 2 guy. He doesn't have to be the number 2 guy anymore. So,
All good reasons to stick it out.
my guess, my strong belief is that Kawhi will resign in Toronto. If he doesn't resign in Toronto, nothing we could have done, nothing the organization could have done, nothing the fans could have done would have ever kept him here. And we got to our first finals, possibly won it. Would love to see him stay, but it'll be okay if he goes.
Yeah, I gotta say, after seeing everything that's transpired, I don't, unless he wants to be somewhere warm throughout the season.
Yeah, but when he was asked about the cold, he's just like, "It's fine. I wear a coat."
Or maybe if his lady, I don't know if he lives with someone and he has a daughter or something like that.
Yeah, he has a daughter.
Unless they're outside, well, they're still inside forces, but forces outside of themselves that might want something different.
Right, but
I
also those kinds of forces are like clearly his family's super supportive,
yeah,
right? And you don't go like his girlfriend. I read that maybe they might be engaged, but they're not sure. His girlfriend he's been with since he was in college. They met in college. You don't spend that many years with an NBA guy and not know what goes with it,
sure.
right? So I think it's less likely that I think it's more likely that they follow his lead when it comes to that kind of stuff. Cuz like basketball is a young man's game. He's not going to play forever. And so there's lots of time to be somewhere warm. Why not be in the best possible place you can be during the peak of your career if it's available, if it's an option?
So unless he does want to go to the West Coast specifically, or a crappy team and start over, I don't see there's any reason for him leaving.
And especially not to LA. I was talking to somebody about this on Twitter yesterday. He just asked to move out of what was a dysfunctional situation for him.
There's the Clippers too. Clippers
I'm
aren't dysfunctional.
I don't yeah, but it's not as out in the open I guess as the Lakers is right now.
Hmm.
But I'm saying Lakers cuz the person I was talking to specifically said Lakers.
Mm-hmm.
Um it doesn't seem likely to me that he goes and puts himself back in another dysfunctional organization. And I kind of see it as a situation as he grew up in San Antonio. And sure, he was happy there until he wasn't. But when you only ever experience one organization, you don't know until maybe you get into another organization that there's a better fit for you. And I
Right.
feel like Toronto's a really good fit for him on the court and off the court.
It would seem that way.
So that's all things Kawhi. Of course, we'll have to do some follow ups when the decisions are made. Uh, we'll do some talking later on about other free agency things because it's a big free agency off season this year. There's a lot of big names.
A lot of big names, a lot
A
of big draft picks that could be on the move.
lot of things. It's gonna be it's gonna be hectic this off season.
Looking forward to it.
But for now, I think we covered all things Kawhi. We are looking forward to watching Game 5 and it hopefully being the last game of the NBA season for 2018-2019. And until next time.
Thanks for tuning in.